Let's talk about the Overton window. Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Heiser Says. My understanding is that today or this weekend the election date will be announced in Australia. So I wanted to talk about the Overton window and why I think everyone in the alt media, or YouTubers, vloggers, everyone should be discussing this and how it should be part of the public discourse here in Australia for the next election. So let's have a look. I put this little presentation together and I'll link to some references in my website below if you want to dig into it deeper. So the Overton window is a range of ideas tolerated in public discourse, also known as the window of discourse, and that's quoted from wonderful Wikipedia. So here we have a little diagram which shows the Overton window going up and down with more freedom or less freedom to discuss these issues. And issues are they're policy, so they're government policy. They're popular issues, but they're not government policy. One would be, I'd say a green popular issue would be getting out of coal. And then you've got sensible issues that aren't quite popular, but people would consider them sensible, so they're allowed to be discussed. And then above that or below that, you have things that are acceptable to be discussed in public. Okay, you can discuss those. Then you go to radical. The issues that are maybe just touched on in the media or in public discourse, but they're considered radical or fringe ideas. And then you have unthinkable ideas. And maybe we'd even call that, these days, what is being labeled as hate speech. And that itself is a scary concept to me. That's why some of the politicians who are saying that hate speech is against democracy are quite terrifying to me, to be honest. So that's kind of an idea, just a diagram of what the Overton window is. And here it's represented in another kind of the left-right axis, or just in a different way. What's policy, what's popular, what's sensible, acceptable, radical, unthinkable. You can't dare talk about that. Now, I'm sure we've all had circumstances where we've said something or we've mentioned something that is radical or unthinkable. Why don't you let me know in the comments, guys, while I have a drink from my stein of coffee. So, now we also have Heylyn's spheres. So it's a theory of media objectivity posited by journalist historian Daniel Heylyn in his book The Uncensored War to explain the coverage of the Vietnam War. And here you've got the sphere of consensus. So motherhood and apple pie, of politics, the things on which everyone is thought to agree. Okay, the sphere of consensus. You've got the sphere of legitimate disagreement. So this is what journalists discuss the two-party system defines as the issues. Now remember, just look at Australian politics, how you've got the Liberal on one side and Labor on the other side. Can you tell the difference? The difference is they're just so close together. Then the sphere of divergence. Political actors and views which journalists reject as unworthy of being heard. Okay, so this is an understanding of how the media portrays information. And here, if you're in the sphere of deviance, the sphere of deviance, if you're diverging from the legitimate discourse, I'll say, you're not even going to get heard. Your opinions aren't even going to get put forward. But now, in the future, we have social media. We have long-form content where you can go right to the source, where you can hear people's opinions right there and not the sound bites that are put forward by mainstream media. And it's not, frankly, I think it's to do with the fact that they want to get clicks, they want to make revenue, so that influences their position. Where for me, this is a hobby. This is a hobby. I'm doing this because I enjoy it. It's fun. I get to talk to people, all online, and I get to have my stein of coffee and ramble about things. So I'm enjoying it. So now, if we have a look here, this is a chart just showing Australian media or different organisations. You've got partisan right, centre, partisan left, and the quality of the organisations. So you've got four corners in the centre, high quality, SBS News. Apparently, I would question that. I think this is out of date. Well, at least what SBS is putting on Facebook, I wouldn't say they're centre at all. Or then again, if all the issues that they're raising is considered centre, that just shows you where the Overton window has gone. I mean, just think about discussing, reducing or limiting immigration for a period of time to allow the Australian economy and our infrastructure to adjust to our rapid population growth in the last few years. Where would that sit on this spectrum? Or maybe single motherhood. Where would that sit on this spectrum? What other issues? Or universal basic income? Or core power? Now, so this shows you just an understanding of where these different organizations are and where they're going to be putting stuff up. And I thought, how can I get a representation of this? Or how can I convey it to people? And I thought, well, actually, as a YouTuber, I have instant access to the Overton window. And the best thing I can say is just looking at my videos and which ones are monetized and which ones are not monetized. And the reason I monetize them is not to make huge fortunes and YouTube stardom, but we know that's coming. But it gives you a bigger reach. YouTube is more likely to recommend your videos, at least I understand it is. But it's interesting to see. I'll have a lot of stuff that's limited, and then I'll request a manual review. And pretty much YouTube will get back to me and will approve it. But there's certain videos that they don't. And I would argue, and you can question me on this, but I would argue this is a kind of a good representation, at least on a global or a YouTube scale, considering who would advertise on it, where the Overton window sits. So you can see here, the video I did yesterday about looking at One Nation's 1997 website, it's been, monetized. It's considered appropriate. It wasn't put in a limited state. Well, I think it was, and I requested its review. I don't know if it actually was or just hit by the algorithm. Comparing housing, the Australian housing crash, it's monetized. I think it instantly was. New Zealand's gang refuses to surrender weapons. It's been monetized. I was surprised actually at that one. I thought it would hit up. Huggies closing down. Yep, no problem. Work on Collins Arch halted. No problem. My interview with Jeremiah 2018, Australia's first men's shelter, has been limited. It's in a limited state. So that means not everyone will advertise on it. And this was confirmed by a manual review. I mean, if you've watched that interview, there's nothing at all in that interview that I would consider controversial. And I guarantee most people would agree with me there. But the thing is, it's to do with intimate partner violence or domestic violence. So, particularly from a man's perspective, so where does it sit on the Overton window? Is that a radical idea? Because advertisers don't all want to be associated with that. And there's certain things I can understand putting in a limited state. But is the first men's shelter here in Australia, should that be in the Overton window? It's definitely not policy. Policy right now is the Duluth model. So it's definitely at one end of the spectrum. So it's just something to think about. Because I'm finding everything with men's rights or men's issues is put in a limited state. It's not okay to be white on Facebook. And that's probably the title, put it in a limited state, but I still asked for it to be reviewed because I didn't think I said anything too controversial there, I guess. Criticizing Facebook for their race-based policies for banning groups is controversial. So where would that sit on our Overton window, guys? That's probably unthinkable. It's probably on the unthinkable spectrum to call that out. And I admit the title is a bit clickbaity, but guys, you gotta play the system sometimes. But it's been limited, and it's gotten a lot more views on BitChute than it has on Facebook. So if we go down, the New Zealand chief censor, okay, I'm not surprised because its relationship to what's happened in New Zealand that was limited. But here we go, the ones calling out Koshi, they were put in a limited state. Okay, so calling out incorrect information put forward by the mainstream media, that's been put in limited state. And here's two more just from Australia's Duluth borders, and 25% men, 25% of men feel like failures. They've been also put in a limited state. So I thought that just to give you an understanding, this is how I would say that I can get a perspective of where some of these issues sit, at least on a global scale from YouTube's perspective, in the Overton window. What do you reckon? Do you think that's a good idea or not? If you have any other suggestions, guys, of how we can get an appreciation of that from a more Australian-specific perspective, please let me know in the comments, because I thought that was a good idea and at least gives me an understanding. But it shows you certain things which are not in the window. Now, what I want to encourage from this coming election that has either been announced probably already when I'm playing this video or in the next few days, is, say you're a staunch, Labour voter, or you're a staunch Liberal voter, or you're a Katters voter. And I've just chucked these on here. This is by no means an accurate position or even my interpretation of where I put them on the Overton window, just with some of the issues that they're discussing, these different parties, just to represent an idea. So say we have here, I've got coal mining. Okay, now is continued investment in coal mining, would you consider that inside the Overton window? No, I wouldn't, because the Greens are definitely against, and it's starting to get pushed out. Is it even sensible anymore these days to discuss it? Because Labor's wants to get out of coal. Is it acceptable, or is it a radical idea to look at investing in coal mining, or is it even unthinkable? What about nuclear power? I would say it's hardly ever discussed in the media. LDP has policies on it. Some of the other parties have discussed it, but it's unthinkable. When you're sitting around a group just discussing it or in the news, when's the last time you heard an article about the benefits of nuclear power here in Australia? What about the Great Barrier Reef? That's all apparently dying here in Australia. There's one, it's popular to consider that it's dying and we need to address it. But what about the arguments that there's no issues with it and that people are getting fired over exposing that? It's unthinkable to discuss of in the popular media. What about the gender gap, the gender pay gap, which I would argue is the earnings gap? I would say it's policy. It is policy of the Labor government. They're going with to Parliament, to the election, with policy. So, say you've got a certain number of issues that you want to take account of, that you want to vote for, or you've got cause with, and okay, you've gotten frustrated with with Labor or with Liberal, but you voted for them. But voting for a minor party, that's a waste of time. I would argue it's not. I would argue with whoever you vote for in this mob, even more, you are pulling this Overton window over to bring more things on the table for discussion. That's what people need to realize. Okay, I mean, these parties, they'll all hate each other. I mean, Anning and ALA, they're now going yellow vest. I mean, Anning and One Nation. I mean, LDP and One Nation. The Conservatives, they will bicker and fight with each other. But regardless of, if you get people from minors in the Senate, you will help shift the Overton window. You will help bring things to discussion that the media considers outside of consideration, that they consider deviant. You will bring that to the table, or at least hopefully your senators will bring those issues to the table so they can be discussed. Serious economic issues that we need to consider, gender issues with regarding to wage gap, domestic violence issues that need to be discussed, trying to stop this slide down. And frankly, I think the Greens are pulling the Overton window to the left side of politics significantly. So you've got Labor pretty much putting forward green policies. So they're abandoning their traditional base. I would argue, I'd postulate, Liberals chasing them. We've got again, discussions of a carbon tax. We've got policies putting forward with regards to electric cars. They want to get pull us out of coal mining, when 35% of our export economy, and I did a video on that the other day, is dependent on that. It is coal. 35%. Oh, maybe not 35. I got to check again. 35% goes to China, but a big chunk of it is coal. Big chunk of it is iron ore. And they want to pull out of that. So that's where my goal is for this election, is to get a discussion happening in public about the Overton window, to make it part of the dialogue, to have people thinking about it and have people realize that, okay, maybe you need to vote. Maybe you need to vote for someone who you traditionally wouldn't have felt comfortable voting for, simply to force that Overton window over. Simply to force it. Simply to send a message to one of the major parties that no, these things need to be discussed. No, I do not accept hate speech. I don't align with everything the Conservatives say. I don't align with everything LDP says, or I don't align with One Nation. They're not the perfect party, but you park your vote in a party like that to help push that window over to change the dialogue. That's what I'm hoping can happen, and that's what I would encourage everyone to discuss with your friends, discuss with your colleagues, discuss online, because I think that's what needs to happen. And right now, we're getting further and further to one side where things are not, where it's deviant to discuss certain things. We just had the censure of Anning in Parliament. So it's showing you there where certain things can't be discussed in public. That's an example of it right there. And regardless of if you disagree or agree with these issues, it needs to be discussed. We need to have speech one way or another. So guys, that is my very rough and ready introduction to the Overton window. Let me know in the comments how I butchered it and done a terrible job. Please, and like, share, and subscribe, and do what you can to get this message out there, because I think that's how we need to approach this election, particularly with so many people frustrated at the major two. I'm not confident any one party is going to be the savior for all of Australia. No. But I'm confident that if we get enough people from the miners in the Senate, that we can shift the dialogue. If you get people from the miners in the House of Representatives, you can shift the dialogue. You can get news time. You can get media time. You can get people doing the long-form content on social media and sharing that to get the real opinions of everyone. Guys, let me know what you think about this idea. Do you think I'm dreaming? Or do you think it's going straight to the pool room? Like, share, subscribe. Ding the bell to see my daily updates, and have a lovely day. Bye for now.